Hey everybody, Pete Gluzak here for Bass University TV. I'm here with Matt Airy, two-time FLW champion, $1 million earner, and man, you almost got it done at the Bassmaster Elite on Guntersville. It's good to have you here with us, buddy.
I'm glad to be here, man. Glad to be here. Yeah, it was close, but you know how this game is that we play. It can be kind of harsh sometimes, but I am a believer that when it's your turn, it's your turn. I've had some things happen on the water, and I'm sure you have too, that you're like, man, I can't believe that just happened, and then you just have days just don't go your way.
Right, and that definitely happens. But I've also, been in the winner's circle and found that, man, when it's your turn to win, it's like nothing you can do to stop
Absolutely. The second tour event I won at Beaver Lake, I had a 5-pounder, which is a giant at Beaver, come out from under a dock, following a swim bait. It's videos on YouTube, and it comes to the boat, and 99% of the time that fish just turns away. Well, I'm out of line, so I just start pulling the swim bait down the side of the boat. He turns with it. It's like muskie fishing at this point. And I figure I actually pull it down, and as I go to turn it, I'm like, this fish doesn't even care I'm in the world. Swallows it and the boat flipping.
Oh my God.
And I win the tournament. So
that's the way it happens.
And then days like Guntersville the last day, and you lose 5 or 6 fish, and you don't know why, and it's just, things happen.
Yeah, it happened. But it was an amazing event, and it was great to watch over there on the Bassmasters. The coverage was amazing. And you were using a technique that I was really intrigued by. Having fished on Kentucky Lake a little bit, I have a little bit of ledge experience, fished a few FLWs out there.
Yep. And,
stroking a jig is something that, I learned to catch fish when they're suspended or, they're not pulling water, that kind of thing. But you did it in a way that I hadn't seen anybody do it before, and I thought, man, this is a really cool technique. I need to talk to you about this.
Yeah, I learned about stroking a jig and a worm. As a matter of fact, I did catch a few fish in practice down there stroking a big Texas rig worm with a 5/16 ounce weight. And I'll usually switch to the worm. We can talk about that later when they kind of start slowing down on the jig bite. Lucky for me at Guntersville, that didn't happen. But I learned it from a good friend of mine who grew up fishing the Tennessee River, actually lived in Cadiz, Kentucky, near Kentucky Lake. And the biggest thing to me when you're actually stroking this jig, and you may have been able to see it live, you may not have been, but every time I would go to hop that jig up, I always make sure there's 7 to 15 feet of slack of line on the water. The reason that is because if you stroke a jig, and I see this is the number one mistake I see people make, if you stroke a jig or a worm or whatever on a tight line, instead of that bait going up and falling vertically straight down, it's jumping towards you, okay? Naturally, this is how I get a fish to react, straight down.
Yes.
If you don't have slack in your line, when you go to hop whatever bait it is that you're deciding to stroke, that bait's gonna come this way and it's gonna fall as more of a glide.
Yeah.
If you put enough slack in your line, you stroke it correctly, it's gonna fall vertically every time. And I use a lot of different trailers on my football jigs, but I always like something that's got a lot of action, and that seems to be what triggers the bite, is when it falls vertically right in front of their mouth.
That's the key. That's the Bass University moment right there, because I promise you, I was doing exactly the wrong thing, exactly what you're talking about.
And you can get bit that way, don't get me wrong, but I get 3 times more bites by making sure there's slack in the line.
And you could see you doing it. Like that's what I would do. I'd reel, get the slack out, and then I'd crack it.
Yep.
And it would come up, and it would come toward me. I knew it would.
Well, and y'all are used to snapping a tube and stuff, and you do that on tight line, correct? Normally, because you're snapping it through vegetation and things like that too. Yep. So that's a little different.
And with smallmouth, a lot of times moving that way,
they don't want it to get away from.
They don't want it to get away, so it works.
Yeah.
For smallmouth, but I noticed that when you did it, it was so obvious. I'm like, what is he doing? Because you were up here, and you throw that slack back in the line, and then you'd snap that slack. And I'm like, what? That's a technique I've never seen. You described it perfectly.
I hated that the whole world saw that, but that's part of the game we play there again. But and my buddy who taught me that, his name's Brian Hickey, and he lives in Colorado now. He was a phenomenal ledge fisherman.
It's Mike Iaconelli. This is Bass U TV.
Here's what's awesome about Bass U TV.
You get the top instructors.
Real tools that help you catch more fish consistently.
And that's why you want to check out Bass U TV.
Join the Bass U family.
Welcome to Bass U TV.